Carter moved through the bustling terminal with the calm precision of someone who had long ago mastered the art of observation. She carried a small black backpack, its contents meticulously organized. A tablet, a notebook filled with handwritten calculations, and a set of pens aligned in perfect order. To the casual observer, she was a typical professional woman, dressed in a tailored navy blazer, her auburn hair tucked neatly behind her ears, earbuds barely visible. She adjusted her boarding pass and smiled politely at a harried airline employee who apologized for a delayed gate change. Everything about her suggested ordinary civility, an everyday traveler taking a routine flight from Los Angeles to New York. Yet beneath that calm exterior, a lifetime of experience thrummed quietly in her mind. Every movement, every glance, every micro-expression from fellow passengers registered in her subconscious. His eyes flicked to a young man fidgeting nervously, a mother soothing a crying child, a businessman repeatedly checking his phone. Each detail, trivial to most, provided data points she instinctively analyzed. Her pulse remained steady, her breathing even. She had trained for situations that made ordinary people freeze in terror, and she knew instinctively that preparation was everything. Settled into her aisle seat and glanced around the cabin. The flight attendants were performing their routine pre-flight checks, securing carts, demonstrating life jackets, and reminding passengers to fasten. Most passengers chatted casually or scrolled through their devices, yet noticed subtle signs others missed. A slight rattle in the overhead compartments, the engine hum that carried differently than usual through the cabin, the way the air pressure felt against the backs of seats. None of it alarmed her. She catalogued the observations as she always did, mentally noting variables and contingencies. Pulling her notebook from her backpack, she flipped to a blank page and began jotting minor observations, calculations, and reminders. Altitude fluctuation, she wrote, underlining it twice. Check emergency exits, cabin weight distribution. Her handwriting was neat, precise, almost militaristic, betraying years of disciplined practice. A man seated across the aisle caught her glance, offering a polite nod, and she returned it with a soft, practiced smile. To him, she was just another passenger. Every interaction was another piece of information, another variable in the complex system she was always mentally mapping. The boarding announcements crackled through the cabin speakers, and his eyes scanned the aisle. Flight attendants moved with practiced efficiency, yet she noticed when one hesitated slightly, dropping a clip on the floor, quickly recovering. The small slip went unnoticed by the other passengers, but registered it. Her mind worked silently, evaluating the probability of minor errors escalating under stress. Every detail mattered. Every second mattered. Her own calm was a stark contrast to the subtle tension building around her. A young boy across the cabin squirmed in his seat, kicking the tray in front of him. A businessman muttered under his breath, frustrated by the delay in boarding. His gaze flicked to the cockpit doors, noting the secure locking mechanism, the small crack where light spilled into the cabin. She remembered the drills, the simulations, the countless hours in cockpits that demanded hyper-awareness. Though she had left the Navy years ago, her mind still instinctively scanned for irregularities, assessing risk in real time. As the plane taxied to the runway, she allowed herself a quiet mental rehearsal. She imagined 1,000 scenarios: minor turbulence, mechanical failure, passenger illness, total emergency landings. Each one played out in her mind, calculated, measured, analyzed. Didn't dwell on fear, she prepared for response. That had always been her approach. Ordinary passengers fidgeted nervously, murmuring anxiously about weather and delays, oblivious to the fact that someone in the cabin had already anticipated every contingency. Thoughts briefly drifted to her past, though she seldom did so outside quiet reflection. Top Gun, the elite Navy program that demanded perfection, discipline, and unwavering focus. The jet cockpits, the blinding sun, the roar of engines, the high-G turns that pressed the world into a blur, all memories that seemed like another life, distant yet alive. She had earned medals, accolades, and the respect of peers, yet she had left it behind deliberately. The world outside her Navy career was quieter, slower. And yet today, in this ordinary morning flight, the skills she had honed were still deeply embedded. The plane accelerated down the runway. Engines roared. Passengers gripped armrests, some muttering prayers, others tightening, leaned back slightly, adjusting her posture, her eyes scanning the cabin calmly. A sudden bump of turbulence, minor but noticeable, rippled through the aircraft. She noted it. She didn't flinch. She cataloged it. Every vibration, every creak of the fuselage, every flicker of cabin lights was data. Most passengers ignored such details. She recorded them silently in her mind, preparing for the unforeseen. Her fingers brushed the small notebook again. She wrote a quick note. Monitor engine sounds. Turbulence pattern unusual. Cabin panic risk low, but observe closely. A stewardess passed by, offering a smile and adjusting a tray. Returned the gesture, calm and unassuming. To an outsider, she was the ideal model passenger, composed, polite, observant. Yet beneath that surface, a storm of calculation and preparation surged quietly. As the plane climbed into the clouds, eyes remained alert. Something about the hum of the engines felt slightly off, not alarming but different. A professional instinct whispered that attention was required. She ran through mental checklists: pressure, fuel ratios, flight path, potential emergency protocols. She noted the altitude, the speed, the angle of ascent. Most passengers were lost in screens or nap-induced stupor. She remained quietly vigilant, the lone passenger whose mind was already preparing for crises no one else imagined. By the time the flight leveled at cruising altitude, had memorized patterns, logged observations, and mentally rehearsed multiple responses. She looked out the window at the cloud tops, feeling a familiar thrill, a calm readiness that came not from excitement, but from mastery. The ordinary flight had revealed hidden signs, a puzzle no one else noticed. And knew, with the clarity only experience could provide, that the coming hours could demand everything she had once learned in jet cockpits, maneuvers, and life-or-death situations. To her fellow passengers, Carter was not merely a passenger. She was a former Top Gun pilot, trained to save lives in circumstances where most would panic. Today, that past would remain a secret, but every muscle, every thought, every decision she had ever trained for would silently prepare her to confront a crisis no ordinary person could survive. The plane had reached cruising altitude, and the hum of the engines lulled most passengers into quiet conversation or absorbed focus on devices. Outside, clouds stretched endlessly, white and soft, masking the sky's volatile nature. Carter remained alert, her senses attuned to the smallest variations in sound and vibration. She noticed a subtle stutter in the engine's rhythm, a brief, almost imperceptible cough. Her eyes flicked to the cockpit doors. Pilots were focused, but she instinctively registered their slight adjustments, micro-corrections that hinted at a mechanical irregularity they hadn't yet fully diagnosed. Then came the first warning. A shrill alarm echoed through the cabin. Oxygen masks dropped automatically from the overhead compartments, startling passengers into panic. A low rumble shook the aircraft, more violent than ordinary turbulence. Mothers clutched children. Elderly passengers gasped, gripping armrests. The plane swayed dangerously, throwing a few individuals into walls and seats. Screams cut through the cabin, panic spreading like wildfire. Flight attendants shouted instructions, but the force of the turbulence drowned out their voices. Pulse remained steady. She leaned forward slightly, scanning the cabin and noting each detail, each human reaction. "Keep calm," she murmured under her breath, more to herself than anyone else, but her voice carried the same steady cadence she had used in high-pressure cockpit drills. She began issuing quiet, precise instructions to nearby passengers. "Stay seated, brace yourself, hold onto the armrest. Look after each other." Her words were met with hesitant compliance. As though instinctively, people recognized the authority in her calm tone. From the cockpit, the pilots were visibly straining. The captain's voice was clipped, tense over the intercom. "We have a partial engine failure. Brace for possible emergency procedures." The announcement incited more panic, immediately calculated their options. She recalled her Top Gun training where split-second decisions determined life or death. She scanned flight manuals, recalled emergency landing protocols, and mentally assessed distances to the nearest suitable airports. Each second counted. Each movement, each instruction, could mean the difference between survival and disaster. A mother's frantic cry caught attention. A child had been thrown from their seat during turbulence. Lunged, bracing herself against the floor, lifting the child and guiding them back to the mother's arms. She spoke softly but firmly, soothing the child while reinforcing calm in the mother. She moved like a practiced soldier through chaos, her eyes constantly monitoring cabin stability, passenger stress levels, and the ever-worsening mechanical warnings. Every small action mattered. Every micro-decision could cascade into larger consequences. His gaze returned to the cockpit. The pilots were struggling to stabilize the plane, the throttles jerking, controls straining under uneven force. Sparks occasionally flickered in the control panels, a reminder of the precarious situation. Yet's mind operated in a precise, logical sequence. She mapped wind currents, calculated fuel limitations, and considered glide paths. She visualized possible emergency landing sites, factoring in runway length, weather conditions, and altitude drops. Even from her seat several rows back, she could anticipate the plane's trajectory far better than most could imagine. Passengers began shouting, some in hysteria. Stood, moving down the aisle, her presence calming those nearby. She instructed passengers to lock armrests, bend knees, and position heads against seats in anticipation of sudden drops. The fear was palpable, thick as smoke, but she projected an aura of control that started to ripple through the cabin. Small groups of panicked individuals began following her guidance, trusting the woman who moved calmly through chaos. She glanced at the overhead panels again. A small spark in one of the engine indicators caught her eye. It was subtle, but she recognized the warning for a potential fuel misfire. A sharp sense of urgency gripped her. If uncorrected, the engine failure could cascade into catastrophic loss. Her fingers brushed her notebook instinctively, where she had scribbled prior emergency protocols during boarding. She silently ran through checklists, mentally commanding, guiding, instructing, and observing. Each action her effectiveness, as if hundreds of lives depended solely on her ability to remain unflustered. The turbulence worsened, throwing a tray from a passenger's lap across the aisle, caught it midair and handed it back, calmly apologizing, her composure unshaken. She knelt beside an elderly man who was trembling, placing a steadying hand on his arm. "You're okay," she said. "Just follow my lead. We'll get through this." Her tone was firm but gentle, commanding attention without inciting fear. Around her, small pockets of passengers began to emulate her calm, listening, observing, and acting on her instructions. Through the overhead intercom, the captain's voice broke again, tense. "Prepare for rapid descent. All passengers brace." Immediately repositioned herself, calculating angles, descent rates, and potential landing strategies in her head. She moved strategically, helping passengers adopt optimal bracing positions while mentally plotting variables. Every past training exercise, every high-pressure flight maneuver, replayed in rapid sequences in her mind. She had once flown supersonic jets through combat zones, and yet here, in a commercial airliner, the stakes were no less critical. 191 lives depended on precision, timing, and courage. The plane jolted violently. Hands gripped the seat in front of her, but her mind was calm, analytical. She shouted instructions where necessary. "Keep your arms in. Hold tight. Focus on your breathing." A few passengers turned to her, recognition dawning in their terrified eyes that she somehow knew what to do. Hidden past her military expertise was guiding each decision, every instruction, every subtle correction of panic. The ordinary flight had transformed into a stage, where her extraordinary skills were the only line between survival and tragedy. As the aircraft stabilized temporarily, took a deep breath. Her eyes swept the cabin, cataloging injuries, tension levels, and passenger morale. She assessed the pilot's strain, the altitude drop, and the worsening engine warnings. There was no time for hesitation. Every move needed precision, every decision calculated. In the midst of screaming, panic, and chaos, Carter, a passenger to the world, became a silent commander, orchestrating survival with the meticulous skill of a Top Gun veteran. Somewhere in her mind, a quiet voice repeated a mantra drilled into her over countless flights and missions. Focus, observe, act. Every second counts. And as the plane pitched downward slightly, the full gravity of the emergency settled over the cabin, yet calm dominance radiated like a lifeline. The coming moments would test every ounce of her knowledge, courage, and skill. The lives of 191 passengers, and the hidden hero within the chaos, depended on her precision, intuition, and experience. Carter's mind raced, not in panic, but in precise, calculated motions. Every alarm, every vibration, every flicker of the cabin lights was analyzed with military precision. She could feel the subtle shifts in weight distribution as passengers clutched armrests, rocked in panic, and shifted unevenly. Her gaze swept across the aisle, a man gripping his seat so tightly his knuckles whitened, a child hiding under her mother's arm, terrified, a flight attendant trying desperately to calm the screaming cabin. It was chaos, but too, it was a matrix of variables she could control if she remained focused. Memories of her time at Top Gun flickered to life in her mind like vivid flashes of light. She remembered sitting in the cockpit of an F-14 Tomcat, feeling the violent surge of G-forces as the plane banked at impossible angles. She remembered instructors pushing her to anticipate the unpredictable, to make decisions when the outcome could be life or death. Every drill, every simulated failure, every emergency maneuver she had mastered over years of rigorous training returned now, not as a memory, but as a blueprint for action. Her fingers brushed her notebook once more, noting fuel status, altitude, cabin weight distribution, and turbulence vectors. Each calculation was instinctive, almost automatic, born from years of repetition and survival drills. Visualized the plane as she had once visualized a fighter jet in combat, its center of mass, its glide path, and its potential responses to external forces. The plane was a machine she had once trusted with her life, and now, unknowingly, she was entrusted with the lives of 191 strangers. Turbulence escalated. Sparks flickered from the overhead console, and a loud metallic groan reverberated through the fuselage. Passengers screamed, clinging desperately to their seats. Remained the calm epicenter of the storm, moving strategically down the aisle. She knelt beside a young boy, wrapping her arm gently around him and whispering instructions to remain still and breathe deeply. She guided a terrified elderly couple into proper bracing positions and helped a mother hold her infant securely. Each intervention was precise, deliberate, calculated to reduce panic while reinforcing her invisible command of the cabin. Her mind, however, was not only on the passengers. It was on the cockpit. She could hear the strained voices of the pilots over the intercom, clipped and tense, communicating critical data. Ran mental simulations of their trajectory, factoring altitude, wind speed, and engine output. The failure in the left engine had created a dangerous asymmetry, threatening to spin the plane if corrections weren't exact. She calculated angles, speeds, and potential emergency maneuvers, with the cold logic of someone trained to survive extreme conditions. Every second, every fraction of a decision could mean life or death. The memories of Top Gun were not merely technical, they were emotional. She recalled the first time she had flown at supersonic speed, her heart hammering against the harness, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She remembered her instructors' harsh words and the pride she had felt when mastering maneuvers others had failed to execute. She remembered camaraderie, trust, and responsibility, the unspoken bond between pilot and machine, between leader and team. Now, those lessons manifested in real time. Her responsibility was not to a fighter jet, but to the human lives surrounding her, and she would not fail. Suddenly the plane lurched violently. Instinct kicked in. She shouted calm, precise instructions. Bend forward, hold your head, brace your knees. Her voice carried authority and control, slicing through fear like a beacon. Small clusters of passengers responded, following her example. Panic subsided slightly where her influence reached. She moved like a trained soldier through the chaos, stabilizing frightened passengers, redirecting energy from hysteria to survival-focused action. Her eyes flicked to the cockpit again. The captain's voice came over the intercom, tight with tension. "Prepare for emergency descent. We are losing altitude fast." His mind raced through calculations. She visualized the glide path, factoring in wind currents and runway length at the nearest emergency airport. The engine's output and throttle limitations dictated precise angles. She ran a mental checklist of emergency protocols, balancing probability with human factors. This was no longer a rehearsal. This was life in its most unforgiving form. She remembered a specific training exercise at Top Gun, a simulated engine failure at high altitude, forcing rapid descent and landing on a small, isolated runway. The panic of the moment, the high stakes, the critical thinking under extreme pressure, it all returned vividly. Adapted those lessons instantly. She projected calm, directed passengers, and prepared mentally for the crucial minutes ahead. Every calculation, every movement, every syllable of instruction mattered. She became both anchor and strategist, guiding those around her even while the aircraft shuddered violently. Time slowed. Could see the panic and fear reflected in the cabin windows and mirrors, yet she remained detached in a controlled, methodical way. Each small task, securing a falling object, guiding a passenger's hands, checking oxygen masks, observing, was executed with flawless efficiency. The Top Gun ethos of preparation, precision, and responsibility permeated her every action. She had been trained to operate under impossible stress, to make decisions with incomplete information, and to save lives when chaos threatened. And now, in this moment, all that training converged. She paused briefly, taking stock. Sparks still flickered. The left engine was sputtering, uneven vibrations rocked the fuselage, and cabin panic persisted in pockets. Had calculated fuel reserves, altitude drops, glide trajectory, and passenger responses. Everything pointed toward one conclusion: survival was possible, but only with exacting, calculated action. There was no margin for error. Every decision had to be precise, every instruction delivered with authority, and every passenger guided with care. Failure was not an option, not for her, not for the 191 lives depending on her. Moved down the aisle once more, speaking to passengers individually, calmly but firmly. "Stay calm, follow my lead, breathe slowly, focus on your position." She adjusted a woman's arm around a child, guided a man to brace properly, and reassured the elderly couple in 12B. Her presence radiated authority, yet empathy. She was not shouting in panic, not screaming instructions. She was orchestrating survival with the quiet intensity of someone who had mastered extreme situations before. As the plane continued its perilous descent, felt a strange mix of adrenaline and clarity. Fear existed around her, thick and suffocating, yet she was calm, precise, in control. Her Top Gun training, her years in cockpits, her countless high-stakes drills, her capacity to remain calm in the face of mortal danger, was the only thing keeping her mind sharp, her body coordinated, and the passengers alive. The ordinary morning flight had transformed into an extraordinary test of skill, courage, and human resilience. Thoughts returned to the mantra drilled into her during countless missions: focus, observe, act, every second counts. Every word was alive in her mind as she prepared for the moments ahead. The turbulence was relentless, the engine failure persistent, the stakes unimaginably high. Yet Carter, ordinary passenger to all but a few, carried within her the precision, courage, and discipline of a Top Gun elite. And the coming minutes would prove that her hidden past was the difference between catastrophe and survival. The plane pitched sharply to the left, tossing passengers against armrests. Oxygen masks dangled, swinging violently. Screams cut through the air, sharp and desperate, but Carter's calm was a stabilizing force amidst the chaos. She moved down the aisle like a practiced officer on the battlefield, observing, calculating, and quietly giving directions. "Stay low, hold your knees tight, and keep your head down," she instructed, her voice firm yet measured. She caught the frightened eyes of a young man clutching his seat and added, "Focus on me. We'll get through this." Her authority, silent yet undeniable, rippled through the cabin. His gaze flicked toward the cockpit again. The pilots were visibly struggling to manage the failing left engine, adjusting throttles, yanking at controls, and communicating terse updates. Sparks flared from warning panels. She calculated the plane's drift, the glide angle, and emergency landing vectors. Using precise, internalized knowledge from her years at Top Gun, shouted over the intercom, "Reduce angle of attack by 2 degrees. Compensate for left engine thrust. Check altitude every 10 seconds." The captain glanced toward the intercom, recognizing the accuracy in her instructions. Though hesitant at first, they began to adjust. Passengers shrieked as turbulence shook the cabin but maintained her position in the aisle. She knelt beside an elderly woman who was shaking uncontrollably. "Grab the armrest, lean forward, breathe with me," instructed calmly. She guided the woman's hands and helped her into the safest possible bracing position. Children clung to mothers, and she reassured each one with the same precise tone, conveying authority without creating panic. Every action was a combination of instinct, training, and tactical thinking, small adjustments that collectively minimized chaos. Sparks flickered again from a circuit panel above the pilot's station. Analyze the situation immediately. If the engine misfire worsened, a full failure could destabilize the aircraft entirely. She shouted a quick instruction into the cabin intercom. "Passengers, lean toward the aisle, brace, hold tight." Her words cut through panic, and small pockets of passengers followed her guidance. The effect was subtle but critical. Weight distribution stabilized slightly, giving the pilots more control. Awareness of human factors, the way fear itself could affect balance and movement, was as important as her knowledge of aerodynamics. She glanced at the nearest flight attendant, who was struggling to calm passengers in row 14, moved swiftly to assist, guiding passengers into proper positions, instructing them to stay low, and maintaining constant eye contact to reassure them. "We can do this," she said softly, repeating it for emphasis. Every passenger who followed her instruction became an active participant in survival. Leadership was invisible yet profoundly effective, an extension of the discipline she had practiced for years. In the cockpit, the captain hesitated, then nodded, acknowledging the validity of her instructions, directed the pilots on adjusting flap positions, engine throttle balance, and glide trajectory. "Flaps 30%. Left engine throttle reduced slightly. Adjust rudder 3 degrees left," she said. Her calculations were fast, flawless, informed by years of experience managing high-speed jets in dangerous maneuvers. Though she had never flown a commercial airliner, the principles of flight remained constant. Her guidance bought precious seconds, giving the plane a more stable trajectory while she continued to manage the cabin. The turbulence worsened, causing a sudden jolt that sent a tray flying from a passenger's lap, caught it instinctively and returned it without comment, maintaining composure. Nearby passengers began to mirror her calm, shifting from screaming to following instructions. She knelt beside a young boy who had been thrown partially from his seat. Placing one arm under his back, she guided him to sit upright and whispered, "Hold tight, you're safe. I've got you." The boy's grip relaxed slightly, his breathing slowing under her influence. Subtle heroism rippled outward, spreading calm like a contagion. She returned to the aisle, observing cabin dynamics. Passengers were now reacting in coordinated ways rather than chaotic flailing, had turned fear into controlled action. She mentally noted every small improvement, every person who needed further assistance, and every hazard that could escalate. Each movement, each instruction, each minor correction was calculated for maximum efficiency. Military training, her ability to lead under extreme stress, transformed the cabin from a storm of panic into a structured environment capable of surviving a near-catastrophic failure. The cockpit, the plane's instruments flickered dangerously, yet remained unshaken. She calculated altitude loss, engine output, and descent angles at speeds that would make most people dizzy. Her mind visualized emergency landing procedures she had drilled repeatedly in simulations years ago. She guided the pilots through complex maneuvers, shallow banks to reduce lateral drift, precise throttle adjustments to balance weight, and calculated turns to line up with the nearest emergency runway. Each instruction was succinct, precise, and rooted in physics, aerodynamics, and survival instinct. She glanced again at passengers, her eyes scanning for stress, fear, and improper bracing. Her quiet corrections continued. "Lean slightly forward, hold your head down, keep your hands locked," she repeated. Elderly passengers followed her lead, mothers clutched children tightly but correctly, and even some of the panicked travelers began to respond automatically to her calm. His presence became the anchor of survival in a cabin that otherwise teetered on the edge of chaos. Minutes stretched like hours. Mine never wavered. She anticipated every jolt, every lurch, every system warning. She communicated quietly but firmly, a lighthouse guiding the crew and passengers through a storm. Her authority was unquestionable because it was rooted in competence, precision, and the innate confidence of someone who had faced death in faster, more violent skis. Every action, every word, every calculated gesture bought crucial time for the pilots, stabilizing the aircraft and preserving hope where fear threatened to dominate. Finally took stock. The plane was stabilizing, cabin panic was gradually contained, and the pilots were responding effectively to her instructions. She remained vigilant, aware that the critical phase was still ahead, the emergency landing. But for now, she had transformed total chaos into controlled action. The ordinary passengers, unaware of the extraordinary woman among them, were following her lead. And Carter, former Top Gun pilot hidden in plain sight, had taken command not by authority, but by precision, calm, and courage, the very traits that defined her secret past. The runway came into view through the cockpit windows like a narrow promise of survival. Carter's eyes tracked every detail, the wet tarmac reflecting sunlight, crosswinds tugging at the aircraft, and the exact angle needed to touch down safely. She could see the fear etched into the pilots' faces, but her calm voice cut through over the intercom. "Reduce descent rate, throttle slightly forward, flaps 30 degrees, align rudder 3 degrees left, keep the glide path steady." The captain, recognizing the precision in her instructions, followed each step with tense obedience. Seconds stretched into eternity. Passengers braced instinctively under guidance. Mothers pressed children tightly to their chests. Elderly passengers leaned forward with trembling knees, and terrified men clenched armrests. Moved through the aisle with purposeful authority, adjusting straps, coaching passengers on head placement, and keeping fear at bay. Every minor correction reduced risk. A falling magazine from the was caught midair. A loose bag was nudged back into position. Panic still rippled, but her presence turned chaos into controlled order, making the cabin almost a mirror of the disciplined cockpit she once commanded. The plane pitched as crosswinds hit harder than expected. Hands tightened on the back of a passenger seat as she recalculated angles and weight distribution in real time. "Everyone stay braced. Eyes down. Follow instructions exactly," she shouted calmly but with undeniable authority. A young boy whimpered in fear and leaned in, whispering, "You're safe. Keep your hands here just like this. We're almost there." Her voice was steady, controlled, a beacon of reason in a storm of terror. Around her, passengers mimicked her calm, leaning into the instructions, turning panic into disciplined cooperation. In the cockpit, the plane groaned under the strain. Engine sputters echoed, flaps strained against wind resistance, and the altitude dropped faster than planned. Ran mental simulations, anticipating every correction needed. Throttle 1.5 forward, rudder 2 degrees left, flaps adjust 29%. "Steady," she called. The pilots, tense but trusting her judgment, sparks flickered from warning panels, but calculations held. Her Top Gun instincts, split-second decisions under extreme stress, kept the aircraft within controllable parameters, every second moving them closer to survival. The runway approached faster. Eyes flicked to the cabin. Some passengers were still screaming, some frozen in fear and some unconsciously mimicking her guidance. She knelt beside a mother holding a baby, gently adjusting the infant's blanket and coaching the mother to hold her child securely. A man across the aisle was gripping the so tightly his knuckles were white, leaned over giving precise instructions. Relax your shoulders, hold the belt properly, keep your head down. Small acts, but critical to survival during the violent landing. The plane's nose pitched dangerously, threatening to drop too fast. Shouted over the intercom, "Lift the nose slightly, flaps 28%, throttle adjust 2 forward." The pilots obeyed, hands trembling over controls. Sparks from the left engine panel flashed, but the aircraft responded. Calculated the landing trajectory with split-second precision, factoring speed, wind gusts, glide angle, and runway length. Her military training, years of supersonic maneuvers and emergency simulations, was now guiding a commercial airliner. A violent jolt threw a trolley cart across the cabin, caught it effortlessly, repositioning it to avoid injury. The turbulence intensified as the plane entered its final descent. She continued instructing passengers, coaching them to brace optimally. Head down, chin to chest, elbows tucked, knees bent. Her calm tone spread like a wave, converting scattered panic into obedient action. Every seat, every handhold, every tiny adjustment improved the plane's chances of survival. Its influence was subtle but critical. Her presence made a difference invisible to the untrained eye, but tangible in every controlled motion. The aircraft touched down violently. Tires screeched against the wet tarmac. Sparks flew as metal ground against the runway, and the fuselage shuddered violently. Remained upright, guiding passengers to hold firm, keeping her own body balanced amid the violent forces. The plane skidded, smoke curling from tires, but its constant instructions, calm, precise, repeated, kept passengers in controlled positions. Every minor adjustment she made, every word she spoke, minimized injuries. Her years of Top Gun training had prepared her for far worse than turbulence, yet the stakes, 191 lives, felt more personal than any mission she had flown. The aircraft finally slowed to a near halt, vibrations fading. A collective gasp filled the cabin, followed by hesitant murmurs. Mothers hugged children, couples held hands, and the elderly breathed deeply, still shaken but alive. Remained vigilant, moving down the aisle, checking passengers, soothing those still trembling, and ensuring no one was left injured from panic-induced falls. Relief began to settle, but she knew the mission wasn't complete until everyone was safe and orderly. Flight attendants emerged from their positions, rushing to check passengers. One paused, looking at with awe. "Who, how?" she stammered, only nodded, brushing off the question with a faint smile. She had saved lives without seeking recognition. Her calm authority had guided 191 passengers through the worst possible scenario on a commercial airliner. And yet in that moment she was still anonymous, a quiet guardian whose past remained hidden. Emergency crews arrived, surrounding the plane with flashing lights. Passengers began to exit cautiously, many still in shock. Cameras flashed, cell phones recorded, and murmurs of gratitude and disbelief filled the air. Helped a young boy down the aisle, handing him gently to his mother. She caught a frightened elderly man's hand and guided him safely toward the emergency exit. Every action was deliberate, measured, ensuring survival extended beyond the plane's belly touching the runway. As the last passenger disembarked, allowed herself a single exhale. The 191 souls had survived, guided by instinct, courage, and calm precision. Her mind cataloged the events, noting small successes and potential improvements. Every calculation she had made, every instruction, every adjustment, every subtle intervention, had mattered. And yet she remained almost invisible in the media storm that was beginning to erupt outside. To everyone, she was just a passenger. To her, she was the culmination of a life trained to master chaos, discipline, and survival. Even as paramedics checked the plane for minor injuries and firefighters inspected the engines, slipped quietly to the rear, unassuming calm. She had done the impossible without recognition. Every passenger alive was testimony to her expertise, but she did not seek glory. Her thoughts returned to the mantra drilled during her Top Gun years: focus, observe, act. Every second counts. In that critical landing, every second had indeed counted. And today, Carter's quiet brilliance had turned disaster into survival. The passengers spilled onto the tarmac, some still clutching children, some leaning on companions, all shaking from the intensity of the ordeal. Emergency crews moved quickly, checking vitals, escorting the injured to ambulances, and guiding everyone to safety. The world around Carter buzzed with chaos, flashing lights, radios, and shouting crews, but she remained calm, quietly assessing the scene. Her hands brushed the shoulder of a shaken man, guiding him toward the medical tent. She smiled softly, offering reassurance without drawing attention to herself. To the world, she was just another passenger, but in reality, she had orchestrated survival for 191 people. Passengers clustered in small groups, still trembling from shock. Mothers clutched children, friends embraced, and couples held hands tightly. Moved through the crowd, checking for anyone left behind, adjusting coats, calming fear, and answering panic questions with precise, measured responses. Everything is okay. Help is here. Breathe. Her words carried authority yet were soft, almost invisible against the louder commotion. She offered no self-congratulation. No, only careful, quiet action to ensure everyone was stable and safe. Her influence rippled subtly, guiding people to act methodically after the terror they had just endured. News crews began to arrive. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and phones captured moments for social media. Everyone wanted to know who had saved the plane, stepped aside, blending into the crowd, observing. Passengers were interviewed, praising the calm presence that had guided them through the disaster. "A woman, she told us what to do, kept us calm," one father said. "We don't know her name, but she saved us," a mother added. The term mysterious hero spread rapidly. Smiled faintly, letting the recognition go to the unknown, allowing the narrative to highlight courage rather than individual fame. Flight attendants gathered nearby, checking inventories, recording reports, and organizing for subsequent procedures. One looked at and hesitated. "Were you helping back there?" she asked, shook her head lightly, brushing it off. "I was just following protocol," she said softly, though her eyes reflected exhaustion. Her every action had been deliberate, informed by years of Top Gun training and military discipline, but no one yet knew her full story. To the world, she was an ordinary woman who had remained calm under pressure. In reality, she had transformed chaos into order, lives at risk into lives saved. Social media erupted. Passengers' videos went viral, showing a woman guiding the crew, assisting children, and maintaining order in the midst of panic. The captions speculated, "Who is the mysterious woman who saved 191 lives? An unknown hero on Flight 412. Ordinary passenger, extraordinary courage." Watched from a distance, her calm demeanor unbroken. She allowed the speculation, the fascination, the praise to exist, but she did not intervene. Heroism, she believed, was not about recognition. It was about action when it counted most, and she had counted meticulously. Emergency crews completed their checks, confirming the plane's engines had stabilized, and no major injuries remained beyond minor scrapes and bruises. Passengers began the slow process of boarding buses to the terminal, still shaken but grateful. Moved alongside them, quietly assisting those needing help. An elderly man struggled with his coat. She adjusted it. A mother juggled 2 children and a diaper bag, steadied her, and offered guidance. The invisible acts of leadership, unnoticed in the media frenzy, were as vital as the ones performed in the air. Authorities began preliminary interviews. Investigators asked passengers to describe events leading up to the landing. "There was a woman, she kept us calm," multiple passengers repeated, gesturing vaguely. One crew member muttered, "She was extraordinary. She must have had training." simply nodded politely when approached, never offering more than minimal details. The attention swirled around her, yet she remained an observer, quietly ensuring the safe transition of passengers from plane to ground. Her heroism had been immediate, instinctive, invisible. Despite the chaos, allowed herself a brief internal reflection. She remembered the moments mid-flight, every calculation, every instruction, every precise adjustment that had kept the aircraft stable, every frightened passenger who had responded to her guidance, every panic-stricken child she had steadied, every panicked adult she had reassured. Those were the real measures of her success. Not the flashes of cameras or the murmured guesses of reporters, but the hundreds of lives that remained whole because of her composure and experience. Recognition was secondary. Survival was primary. Soon, emergency officials began coordinating statements. They praised a calm passenger who had helped coordinate efforts in the cabin. Airline staff spoke of her extraordinary presence of mind. Social media continued to speculate. Hashtags like Flight Hero and Mysterious Woman trended. Watched silently, allowing the story to grow, feeling a quiet satisfaction that the passengers had survived. But the truth, the full extent of her skill, the legacy of Top Gun training, the courage under extreme pressure, remained hidden. For now, the world admired her as a quiet hero. The secret of her elite past remained hers alone. As night approached, the airport began to settle. Passengers departed with buses to hotels or connecting flights, hugging crew members and each other. Lingered for a moment, observing the chaos now fading into calm. Emergency lights still flashed, radios still crackled, but life had returned to a fragile normal. She allowed herself a single deep breath, appreciating the completion of her mission. 191 lives were safe. Her calculations had worked. Her instructions had held. And yet, in her heart, she knew the story was far from complete. Her secret past would soon emerge, shocking the very people who had witnessed her invisible heroism. Walked quietly toward the airport exit, blending with the crowd. Reporters followed her, questioning passengers, but no one could identify her. She remained anonymous, yet completely fulfilled. She had saved lives, orchestrated order amid chaos, and ensured the plane's survival. That, to Carter, was the essence of heroism. Not fame, not accolades, but action and responsibility when every second counted. And as she disappeared into the night, the whispers of awe and speculation followed her, unaware that the woman they praised was far more extraordinary than they could imagine. The day after the harrowing emergency landing, the world buzzed with curiosity. News outlets were flooded with eyewitness accounts of a mysterious woman who had guided passengers through the terror. The airline had released a statement praising a calm, heroic passenger, but her identity remained unknown. Carter, walking through the airport quietly, still in her navy blazer, felt the weight of the event settle over her. Passengers whispered her name in interviews, calling her extraordinary, but she continued to blend into the crowd. To the casual observer, she was just another survivor, but the truth was far more astonishing. Inside the airline's press briefing room, reporters packed the chairs, cameras whirring, microphones capturing the anticipation. Airline executives were poised to announce the hero's identity, but confusion lingered. Many passengers had tried to recall her details, but in the chaos, she had remained unremarkable, anonymous. Then, as entered, her presence immediately drew subtle attention. Someone recognized the intensity of her eyes, the calm precision of her posture, the aura of authority she carried effortlessly. The whispers spread like wildfire. Could it be? A young flight attendant, unable to contain herself, approached a reporter. She seemed like a trained professional, not just calm, commanding. "I've never seen anything like it." The reporter nodded, turning toward the executives. "We need to find out who this is," he murmured. Remained still, quietly observing, letting events unfold. She had performed her duty without expectation of fame, but the world was eager to know the woman who had saved 191 lives in a near-catastrophic event. Finally, the airline's CEO stepped to the podium. Ladies, and we are here to honor a passenger who displayed extraordinary composure and skill during an unprecedented emergency. We now invite her to join us on stage. A hush fell over the room. Cameras zoomed. Eyes scanned the crowd. Calm as ever, approached the stage with quiet confidence. She allowed herself a small nod to the executives, then faced the audience. The tension was palpable. When the CEO spoke her name, gasps rippled through the room. Carter, former Navy Top Gun pilot. The words stunned everyone. The press froze, pens hovering, cameras flashing. Flight attendants whispered in disbelief. Passengers who had attended the briefing clutched their hands to their mouths. Top Gun, the legendary, elite program few ever entered, let alone mastered, had hidden her past for years, living an ordinary civilian life. But the truth now exploded into view, rewriting the narrative of heroism. A reporter finally broke the stunned silence. "Top Gun, you mean you were a fighter pilot?" Nodded, her calm smile unwavering. "Yes, I flew in the Navy, trained for high-stress combat situations, and survived countless emergency scenarios. Today, those skills were the difference between chaos and survival." The room erupted in awe. Questions flew, but she answered each with measured composure, never exaggerating, never boasting, simply explaining how training and discipline had saved lives. Passengers from the flight stepped forward, still in disbelief. A young boy tugged at her sleeve. "You saved us. You were amazing," crouched to meet his eyes, giving him a gentle smile. "You stayed brave and followed instructions. That helped me help you." Mothers hugged children tightly, while the elderly woman she had steadied nodded tearfully. Each person echoed gratitude, now amplified by the revelation that the woman they had relied upon was not just calm, but an elite combat-trained pilot. The room buzzed with admiration. The CEO continued, emphasizing the rarity and significance of skills. What makes her actions extraordinary is not just composure, but the elite training behind it. Carter is a Top Gun veteran, an accolade that speaks volumes about courage, skill, and leadership under pressure. Today, she those traits not in a fighter jet, but in saving 191 lives aboard a commercial flight. Cameras focused tightly on, capturing every nuance of her calm, poised presence. Reporters scribbled notes furiously, already recognizing the story as one for history books. Social media erupted further. Videos of actions went viral again, now contextualized with her Top Gun past. Hashtags exploded. Top Gun hero, Carter, real-life maverick. Commentators speculated about her courage, discipline, and composure. People across the country marveled at the combination of ordinary civilian appearance and extraordinary skill. She became the embodiment of quiet, competent heroism, the kind that did not seek recognition until it was undeniable. Despite the attention, remained grounded. She answered questions about the flight calmly, focusing on passenger safety, cabin coordination, and the critical moments of decision-making. She downplayed fame, emphasizing the teamwork she had observed, the cooperation of passengers, the professionalism of flight attendants, and the pilot's responsiveness. "It wasn't just me," she said. "Everyone contributed. I just happened to have experience that allowed me to guide decisions under pressure." Her humility amplified the admiration the public felt for her. For the revelation of her past brought closure. Her Top Gun career had been a point of pride but also secrecy, a life lived with discipline and hidden accomplishment. Now, that past merged with the present, validating her skills in a new arena. The passengers who survived had witnessed her calm authority firsthand. The pilots, once struggling to manage the crisis, now publicly acknowledged the guidance she had provided. Her identity as a Top Gun pilot turned a story of survival into a story of awe-inspiring expertise. As interviews wound down, stepped away from the cameras, she felt a quiet satisfaction. Lives had been saved. Chaos had been transformed into order. And now the world knew the truth. The ordinary-looking woman in a Navy blazer was anything but ordinary. Top Gun had prepared her for death-defying situations, and she had wielded that training with precision, courage, and humility. The revelation was complete. Carter, hidden hero, had finally claimed her rightful place in history. Later that evening, she reflected quietly at home. News clips played across multiple channels, recounting her heroics, showing passengers praising her calm and nodding her elite training. Messages poured in from people across the nation, thanking her for saving lives. Smiled softly, closing her laptop. The recognition was overwhelming, but what mattered most was the lives saved, the calm preserved, and the knowledge that her skills had been used to their fullest. Top Gun had given her more than accolades. It had given her the ability to make a difference when it mattered most. In the days following the emergency landing, Carter's story dominated headlines nationwide. The woman who had calmly guided 191 passengers to safety, once a mystery, was now recognized as a former Top Gun pilot. News channels replayed footage from the cabin, highlighting her authority, precision, and composure. Social media exploded with admiration. Top Gun hero trended globally, yet remained grounded, quietly observing the growing attention without letting it overwhelm her. To her, the recognition was secondary. The lives saved and the calm maintained were the true victories. Airline executives formally invited her to a press conference honoring her actions. Reporters crowded the stage, eager to hear firsthand from the woman who had been both passenger and guiding force. Spoke humbly, emphasizing teamwork and cooperation over personal achievement. Every passenger who followed instructions, every crew member who stayed professional under extreme stress, contributed to saving lives, she said. Her words reflected the discipline ingrained in her by years of military service, blending humility with unwavering authority. Audiences watched, captivated not only by her story, but by the rare combination of courage and calm she embodied. The pilot she had guided publicly acknowledged her role in the landing. Both men stood beside during interviews, visibly emotional. "Without her, we might not have been able to stabilize the aircraft in time," one pilot admitted. "Her instructions were precise, clear, and she knew exactly what to do." The revelation stunned the public. An ordinary passenger, hidden in plain sight, had outperformed even trained professionals under extreme duress. His presence of mind, honed by Top Gun training, had saved nearly 200 lives. The acknowledgement cemented her story as legendary. Passengers continued to reach out. Mothers wrote heartfelt emails, children sent drawings, and families shared video messages expressing gratitude. "You kept us alive," one woman wrote, her words trembling with emotion. "You gave me the courage to hold my child safely. I will never forget you." Read each message quietly, humbled. The human impact of her actions, lives preserved, families intact, was far more meaningful than any accolades or media coverage. She realized that heroism was not measured in fame, but in the tangible effect one had on others' lives. Despite the media frenzy, his demeanor remained consistent, calm, precise, and unpretentious. She avoided sensationalized stories and focused on what mattered: the lessons learned, the skills applied, and the lives saved. She participated in interviews to educate the public on passenger safety, emergency protocols, and the importance of remaining calm in crises. Her military expertise translated seamlessly into civilian instruction, bridging her past and present to create a tangible impact on society. Had transformed her elite skills into a force for public good. The story soon inspired broader discussions about crisis management and civilian preparedness. Airlines consulted with her to review emergency protocols, seeking her insights on passenger coordination and cabin management. His advice emphasized simple, effective instructions, clear communication, and maintaining composure under extreme pressure. Her influence extended beyond Flight 412, shaping safety strategies for millions of passengers worldwide. What had begun as a single act of heroism now rippled into systemic change, elevating quiet influence to enduring significance. In quieter moments reflected on the events, she remembered the turbulence, the engine failure, the faces of terrified passengers, and the split-second decisions that had saved lives. Every calculation, every instruction, every subtle adjustment mattered. Her Top Gun training, once focused on fighter jets and combat scenarios, had found its ultimate test in a civilian airliner. She understood that heroism was not about spectacle. It was about preparation, courage, and acting decisively when circumstances demanded it. That lesson, she realized, applied not only to aviation but to life itself. Awards soon followed, received national recognition, including commendations from aviation organizations, civilian safety groups, and even the Department of Defense. Yet she accepted each with measured humility, always highlighting the collective effort of passengers, crew, and responders. She became a symbol of extraordinary competence hidden behind ordinary appearances, a reminder that courage and skill could manifest in anyone anywhere, without fanfare or expectation. Her life, once private, became an enduring lesson in quiet heroism and responsibility. Story also inspired countless individuals to pursue training, education, and readiness for emergencies. Schools, civic groups, and aviation programs invited her to speak, emphasizing calm under pressure, leadership, and practical problem-solving. She encouraged ordinary people to develop extraordinary capabilities, discipline, courage, and preparedness as tools to navigate life's unpredictable challenges. Her example transformed fear into empowerment for those willing to learn. A single passenger had become a teacher, mentor, and role model on a national scale. Years later, would reflect on Flight 412 not as a moment of fame, but as a moment of duty fulfilled. The passengers she had guided remained alive, families intact, and the airline safer because of her interventions. The quiet satisfaction of a mission completed successfully, lives preserved, and chaos transformed into calm was her enduring reward. Public acclaim, though significant, paled in comparison to the internal knowledge that her training had been used to save hundreds of lives. That realization, more than any award, defined her legacy. As the sun set over the city, Carter stood on her balcony watching planes streak across the sky. She thought about the young boy she had steadied mid-flight, the mother clutching her infant, the elderly woman trembling in fear, and how each life had mattered in that fleeting but critical moment. The echo of adrenaline and responsibility remained vivid, yet her heart was calm. She had taken control, saved lives, and revealed her extraordinary skills to the world. Top Gun had trained her for the impossible, but Flight 412 had shown her the ultimate reward. That courage, composure, and quiet skill could change the world in an instant. And so Carter, once an anonymous passenger, once a Top Gun pilot, became both legend and teacher, known for the day she saved 191 lives, and for the timeless lesson that heroism often hides in plain sight, waiting for the moment when it is most needed. Her legacy endured, not in headlines alone, but in every life she touched, every protocol she improved, and every person inspired to act with courage and precision in the face of the unimaginable.